Oh, hello, hello, hello. My friend Scotty J here, back again with another episode of 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. On our last episode, we ran through door 8, played around the laboratory, found a key, and we met up with the rest of the other group. We approached a door, and as we opened it, we found... it would appear to be... that's right, the original room we were in from doors 3, 7, and 8. We ran back into Ace, it would seem. I see. So the 6 of you split up into 2 teams and went through doors 7 and 8. You solved the puzzles in the operating room and the laboratory, and then met one another in the hallway after opening your respective locked doors. He looked like anyone might, after only just waking up, but it seemed his brain was working as well as ever. He had managed to grasp, summarize, and understand each team's report. At any rate, I feel a bit silly for my little show of altruism. I'm sure you'll be back for me. Well, I did hope you'd come back, but I confess I didn't think you'd be back so soon. Ace shook his head with a rueful smile. Well, we saw each other again, and we ain't dead, so that's good enough. 7 smiled. Anyways, I say we get out of this creepy old place. We found the key we need. The key? Ain't that what I just said? I'm talking about the Jupiter key. I found it in the operating room. Here. 7 tossed something small and metallic towards Junpei. He caught it and found the object was a key. On it, someone had engraved the symbol very similar to a 4, or a cool-looking 21, or an upside-down N. But actually, he looked over at June, who nodded back. It had to be the Jupiter symbol. I'm gonna let you hold on to that, alright? Yeah, got it. Junpei tucked the new key into his pocket. As a group, they had 3 keys that had not been used. The Earth key, which had been found in the laboratory. The Saturn key card, which had been found in the kitchen. And the Jupiter key, which Santa had just handed to Junpei. Junpei tucked the new keys into his pocket. June spoke up. The Jupiter key is supposed to be for the door at the end of that long, straight hallway, right? Yeah. If the map's right, then it connects to the central staircase. Then next to the stairs... Wait! These have been the first words anyone had heard from Clover in quite some time. Her face suggested they weren't going to be very happy words. What about door 3? Look, you saw the map, right? It's the same as 7 and 8. Just lead us back to the big hospital room. There's no point in seeing what's on the other side of that door. There is a point. At least, there is for me. There were tears in her eyes, but she glared at 7 as hard as she could, just the same. She looked very much like a frightened puppy. There wasn't a man alive who could have resisted those tears. 7 looked everywhere in the room except at Clover, and muttered and coughed apologies under his breath. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Snakebite be on the other side of door 3. Clover nodded once. The next person to speak was Ace. Very well. I'll be coming with you then. I've had a nice long rest. I think it's time I was up and about again. So 7, you'll help me, won't you? Huh? Me? Junpei did the calculations quickly, in his head, of course. 4 plus 1 plus 7 equals 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3. Looked like 7 was going with them. At last, he seemed to give up, though. Damn, well, I guess that's how it's gotta be. So I'm going with you, huh? Yes, you are. Alright, let's get moving. And so it was decided that Clover, Ace, and 7 would discover what lay beyond door 3. Okay, we're heading out. Be careful. Whoa, didn't think I'd be hearing that from you, Lotus. Don't let it go to your head. I'd be in trouble if the 3 of you bought it. The rest of us can't open door 9. Ah, the truth comes out. 7 nodded, as if the answer made much more sense, and pulled the lever on the red. Okay, let's go. The door opened and Ace, Clover, and 7 jumped through it. 6, 7, 8. After exactly 9 seconds, the door closed noisily. All right, we should get moving too. Huh? Get moving? Where are we going? Everyone except Lotus seemed rather confused. Well, it would be a waste of time to just sit around, wouldn't it? Let me explain. Oh, I get it. We're going to see if we can get anywhere interesting with the Jupiter key. Yes. If we're lucky, we might find Snake. They were at the end of the hallway, lined by individual hospital rooms. The Jupiter key symbol was engraved on the keyhole. All right, Junpei, open it if you please. Yeah, I'm on it. Junpei rolled the Jupiter key out of his pocket and slid it into the keyhole. It twisted. With a nice sharp click, he felt the door unlock. All right, ready, guys? Junpei's companions nodded. He nodded back, then slowly and quietly opened the door. Inside was exactly what he expected to see from the map of the ship's interior. They were in a tremendous hall, almost like a ballroom, with a massive central staircase. Great, back to the beginning. You sure this is a good idea? What do you mean? Well, we already searched every inch of this room, didn't we? I'm asking you if there's any reason we need to come back here. Well, of course there's a reason, Santa. Man, sometimes I can't tell if you're smart or just lucky. Huh? This. Junpei pulled 2 things out of his pocket. The Saturn key card and the Earth key. Santa cocked his head to one side, like an inquisitive bird, and looked at them. After several long moments, during which it became apparent that Santa had no idea what the cards meant, June took pity on him. Don't you remember, Santa? On C deck, where we are now, there was a big elevator behind the stairs, remember? And next to the elevator, there was a key reader with a Saturn symbol on it. And on A deck, on the door to the left, there was a keyhole with the Earth symbol on it, I think. So the 2 keys that Jumpy has, should let us use the elevator and the door on A deck. Huh. Yes, that's right. June smiled, pleased with herself. So did Santa. All right, I got it. Let's get started then. What do you say we split up into 2 teams? Lotus and I will search the Earth one, so you 2 can search Saturn, all right? Sounds good? Junpei handed the Earth key to Santa. They decided that their initial search should be brief, only 10 minutes. They'd meet back near the staircase once they were done. Junpei and Jude headed for the elevators. Sure enough, there was a card reader bolted to the wall next to the left elevator. He lined the Saturn key card and swiped it through the reader. A light on the upper left corner blinked to life. Great. Looks like it's working now. All right. Now how do we call the elevator? There was a single button to the right of the elevator door. On the bottom was the upside-down triangle, the universal symbol for down. There didn't appear to be an up button. Junpei pushed it. He didn't have much of a choice. It opened. Look, Jumpy. June's voice was excited, but Junpei could hear a tinge of anxiety. Ah, sweet, it opened. Let's get going. He grinned at June and stepped towards the open door. As he was about to set foot in it, he felt a hand on his arm. Wait! What? I'm not really... Oh gosh. Junpei was at something of a loss. What could she possibly be so frightened of? June's probably afraid of. Okay, so now this will lead us to a rather infamous scene if we go through being locked up alone with a boy. So I think I'll do that another time. So for now, we're just going to say that they could only go down, all right? All right. She was afraid that being in the only elevator button pointed down. That meant, of course, that the elevator couldn't go any higher than the floor they were on. As he thought about it, Junpei realized he hadn't seen elevators on A or B deck near the central staircase, all of which meant the elevator could only convey them to the lower decks, and the floor just below them, on D deck, should be completely submerged. That meant... Hey, wait a minute. This elevator came up from somewhere under us, right? Well, yeah, I guess it did. It didn't open right away after you pressed the button. There was a motor noise like it was moving, and then it opened. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So take a look inside. Junpei jerked his head towards the interior of the elevator. It's not wet at all, is it? The walls and even the floor are totally dry. Oh, you're right, they are. She looked around the elevator, slightly embarrassed. Well, let's test it. Test it? Yeah, watch this. Junpei put one foot in the elevator and bent around the corner of the door until he could see the floor buttons. There were only two, E and C. He pushed the E button and jumped out of the elevator. The door slid shut, and they heard the grinding of the motor as the elevator car moved down. A few moments later, they heard the sound of the elevator doors grinding open several floors below. Junpei nodded to June and pressed the button again. A few moments later, the elevator returned. The door slid open, and just as Junpei had expected, there was no water to be found. See? Junpei couldn't resist puffing out his chest, just a little bit. June, however, still looked confused. What does that mean? How can E-Deck be safe if the D-Deck is full of water? Well, here's what I think. The elevator shaft in E must be watertight and separated from wherever the ship has been punctured. Here, let me show you. He pulled out his notebook and pen and sketched out a rough illustration. I see. So this is why the ship hasn't sunk. The shape of the inside keeps it all from filling with water? Yes, I think that's what's going on. Junpei continued talking as he closed the notebook and slipped it back into his pocket. So I'm going to go down and check it out. You stay here, all right? But... Oh, come on, just do it, all right? He gave June's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then hopped onto the elevator. He pushed the E button, and the door began to close. June looked worried, her eyes darting back and forth, as if she was trying to make a decision, when suddenly... I'm coming with you! Huh? At the last possible moment, June dashed forward, turning sideways just in time to slip through the gap between the closing doors. Junpei jammed his fingers against the open button, but it was too late. The door had shut, and he and June were in the elevator, and it was heading down to E-Deck. He was so surprised by June that he didn't even have time to think about what awaited them on E-Deck. The elevator stopped, and the door slid open. They stepped off onto the floor outside the elevator. Nothing seemed especially unusual. No fish going about their fishy business, or jellyfish floating lazily through the water. There was, however, a blowfish, or at least something that looked very much like one. June's cheeks were puffed out, and her mouth a tiny, intense frown. Oh, knock it off. It's just like I thought. This part hasn't flooded. Come on, just look around. There's no water here. June looked around nervously, then... Ah! I exhaled. You're right. It's not flooded at all. See? But there's a whole lot of water. Yeah, right on top of us. What's going to happen if the ceiling breaks? Junpei thought about it for a moment. We'd probably die. Oh, don't be so casual about something like that. Well, at any rate, we should probably get back to it as soon as we can, once we're done looking around here. Lotus and Santa might already be back. Okay, good idea. Junpei glanced around the room they'd found themselves in. The first thing he noticed was a set of thick iron bars. They ran the length of the room and separated the left elevator from the right one. Well, we can't go over there. Right. Then perhaps In the corner of the room that housed the elevators, Junpei found an opening. He walked up to it and stuck his head around the corner. A long, straight hallway stretched out in front of him. That door at the end of the hallway. There's something written on it. Yeah, let's go have a look. Junpei and June set off down the hallway at a brisk clip, somewhere between a run and a jog. Before long, they found themselves in front of the door. It was a number written in bright red paint. 6. I knew it. This is a numbered door. And indeed, there was a red bolted to the wall next to the door. Of course, with only 2 people, there wasn't much they could do with it. All right, let's head back. Yes. Junpei and June turned and headed back to C deck. On their way back, Junpei noticed a map on the wall. As it turned out, it was a map of the ship's interior, for E deck. Huh? So you guys found door 1. They met back with Santa and Lotus, who would explain what they'd found. Apparently, there was another numbered door on A deck, just like the one on E deck, beyond the door the Earth Key opened. According to Santa and Lotus, there was a 1 on the door. All told, they discovered 2 new doors, the 6 door and the 1 door. It is interesting that E deck wasn't flooded. Lotus was quiet for a moment, lost in thought. Well, we don't really know if all of E deck is safe. We only checked the area around the elevator. Even so, it's still very interesting. You said that the 6th door was there, right? Yes. That means Zero planned all this out, even the sinking. That would have meant some pretty serious remodeling of the ship's interior. It's a bit mind-blowing when you think about it. Yeah. I wonder how long it took. I can't even imagine how much it must have cost. It'd have been a ton, that's for sure. Well, it does go along with what Ace was saying. The most reasonable explanation would be that this was done by some organization with access to a whole lot of cash. Yeah, it does make sense. That thought made them all go quiet for a moment. June bit her lip while Lotus sighed softly to herself, and Santa cracked a stiff neck and stared off into the distance at nothing. I don't think it's a very good idea to stay here. June looked up at Junpei with large, pleading eyes. Yeah, you're right. Ace and his team might be back already. Well, June, Junpei, and I should be able to open door 1. Huh? You're leaving me behind? 8 plus 6 plus 5 equals 19. 1 plus 9 equals 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. Oh, just kidding. All right, let's go. Lotus's words were the impetus they needed. Back to the large hospital room they went. The moment they stepped inside, a tremendous voice echoed from across the room. Hey! Where the hell did you guys go? It was 7. Ace was right behind him, and Clover was behind Ace, although she seemed to be hanging back. It looked as though there was something strange about them. 7 had the look of a man who'd seen a ghost. Ace was just as pale, and Clover looked as though she were only moments away from passing out entirely. For a long moment, they simply stood there, looking at one another. Junpei looked around nervously, waiting for someone else to speak. But no one did. He looked at 7. What happened? What the hell kind of question is that? 7 was trying very hard to be angry, but something had shaken him. Hard. His shoulders were trembling, and his voice was strained. Snake is... 7 couldn't finish. He just looked away, his face twisted by... Well, Junpei wasn't sure what. Instead, it was Ace who spoke. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and spoke. Snake is... dead. He died, just as the 9th man did. It was as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out of the room. Junpei felt his heartbeat quicken, and he realized he was having trouble breathing. He could feel cold sweat beating on his forehead and neck. June, Santa, and Lotus looked the way he felt. All 3 of them frozen in place, their faces white. Oh my God! That's not true, is it? We should make sure. Yeah, right, we should. They nodded to one another and headed for the number 3 door. Oh, wait! Not that way. They stopped short and turned to look at 7. He was pointing at the door with no number. I stuck a screwdriver in there to keep the door from closing all the way. It's not locked, so you just have to go in that way. Where is he? The shower room on the left side of the hallway. I put a broom in there too, just to keep the door open. We can get to it without going through a numbered door, right? Yeah, that's right. Their new destination clear, Junpei and his companions headed to the door with no number. Once in the hallway, it was easy to spot the metal door on the left wall. It hadn't been open when they were first through, though. But now, just as 7 said, there was a broomstick between the door and the frame, keeping it open. They looked at it for a moment, then stepped inside. Ugh! Oh, it smells horrible! Lotus wrinkled her nose and covered her mouth in disgust. Even Santa pinched his nose shut. Yeah, this is pretty awful. I feel like I'm gonna puke. It was just as bad as they said. No, perhaps even worse. A hideous smell filled the air, so thick they could almost taste it. It was sour and smelled of fish, feces, and burnt meat. It worked its way down through Junpei's nose, through his throat, to pound against the entrance to his stomach. He put his hands over his mouth and struggled to keep what little was in his stomach where it belonged. They didn't have to wonder where the body was, though. There was blood everywhere, and a few arms of the splatter reached towards them as they walked through the door. All one had to do was follow the many radial arms to their source. The body itself was hidden behind a divider. June, you should stay here. But please, just do me a favor, okay? All right? He didn't give her a chance to say no. He put his hands on her shoulders, as if to shove her into the ground like a tent pole, turned, and then walked towards the end of the divider. He felt like it took an eternity for him to get there. Santa and Lotus followed, timid and nervous as a pair of children. Eventually, they reached the divider. They looked at one another and nodded slowly. Junpei put his hands on the divider and peered around the corner. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. He felt his heart collapse in his chest, just like an empty cigarette carton, and time froze. He knew in that instant that he would take the image before him to the grave. What was left of the body sat in a sea of blood. Chunks of flesh, torn from the body, sat in the blood like tiny islands in a great Red Sea. A vast, ragged hole had been torn in the torso, and what remained of his intestines spilled out of it like fresh spaghetti. Smaller chunks of meat had splattered against the wall, become stuck there as they dried. Globules of yellowish fat had left trails like tiny slugs as gravity pulled them down the wall, even as they dried to it. Just like Ace said. Santa's voice was strained. Junpei suspected he was holding down some vomit of his own. Just like the ninth man. The detonator in his bracelet set off the bomb in his gut. It looked as though the explosion had been quite powerful. His legs were both bent in odd, unnatural ways. His left arm had been split open, exposing the painfully white bone of his inola. His bracelet lay next to him. He seemed to have hit the wall hard enough to have shattered the display, which lay on the ground in pieces. Half his head had simply collapsed. The blood coating it made it look as though raw pizza dough, covered in sauce. His clothes, too, were covered in blood. The burgundy tie, the white shirt, the jacket with the yellow piping, and the gray slacks. They were all familiar to Junpei. No mistake about it. It's Snake. Lotus's voice was unnaturally deep and strained. Junpei heard it catch in her throat. The squeal of the tortured metal made Junpei's teeth curl. It sounded like the noise of a ghost would make. No matter how many times he heard it, he never got used to it. Every time, it put him on edge. It didn't help that there was a girl nearby who looked far more like a ghost than any living human should. It was Clover. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head drooping listlessly onto her chest. Her eyes were blank and stared across the room at nothing. Her breathing was slow and mechanical. Aside from the rising and falling of her chest, she didn't move. Junpei felt as if even a nudge might cause her to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Snake was probably murdered. Chances are he was killed the same way as the 9th man was. Seven lowered his voice, likely in an effort to keep Clover from hearing what he had to say. There were 4 other people in the room with Junpei and Seven. Ace, Santa, June, and Lotus. Seven looked at each one of them in turn and continued. It's pretty straightforward. Not that hard to figure out how they did it. First, the killers got Snake to authenticate on the red to open door 3. Then they shoved him into it, alone, and waited 9 seconds for the door to shut. Once that door shut, it was over for Snake. But he didn't give up. He probably knew it wouldn't do him any good, but he ran into the shower room looking for the dead. It was a small chance, but it wasn't like he had anything to lose. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The detonator's only deactivated if everyone who authenticated when they went in uses the dead. Then, 81 seconds after he was shoved in, that happened. I see. So that's what you meant by killers, huh? You need at least 3 people to open one of the numbered doors, including Snake. It wouldn't open for Snake in a single killer. Exactly. That means we're looking at multiple perps here. Junpei crossed his arms and grunted. Well, just in case, I want to make sure. Let's say you're right. When do you think Snake was killed? When we all split up to look for the parts of the Reds, I think. Right after that is when we noticed he was gone. That would mean that none of us have alibis. We were all off searching the rooms we'd been assigned, looking for those parts. Yeah. That means anybody could have been the killer. Wait a minute! What are you talking about? June seemed shocked. How can you say one of us is the killer so casually? Well, not just one of us. If I'm right, then at least 2 of us are murderers. Why don't you calm down a bit, Seven? What are you going to gain by being so suspicious? That's what Zero wants, you know. What Zero wants? Exactly. This game was set up by Zero, wasn't it? Any game has a winner and loser. Whoever makes it through door 9 is the winner, and those who don't are the losers. Zero is trying to make us fight against one another for that victory. Then you're saying that Zero is trying to split us up by making us fight each other? Yes. That is why we can't let ourselves fall prey to suspicion. We have to trust one another and form a strong bond of friendship. Otherwise, we'll end up ensnared by Zero's manipulations. Then, does that mean the person who killed Snake? Yes, almost certainly is Zero himself. If there's anyone we should doubt, it should be Zero. He masterminded this game and kidnapped all of us. Doesn't it seem reasonable that he would have killed Snake as well? Junpei hadn't really considered that. If Zero had killed Snake, then Zero was on the ship with them. Was Zero on the ship with them? I think Zero has to be on the ship with us. Of course he was. That was obvious. Zero was somewhere on this ship, but Junpei had no idea where. Junpei mumbled to himself, lost in thoughts. Where could Zero be hiding? Suddenly, everyone went very quiet. The silence was cold and clammy, and Junpei could feel it crawling across his back and around his throat. Again, he heard the ghosting, moaning noise. And moments later, a person who looked more ghost than human appeared. It was Clover. She looked at the floor as she spoke, and her voice was a cold monotone. I think Zero is one of us. Every human body in the room froze. The only sound was the muffled rustling of breath. Eyes darted from face to face. One of these faces was the face of their jailer. But who? Junpei? Do you think that's possible, or do you think that's crazy? It's definitely, I guess, possible that Zero is one of us. I mean, his whole game seems to be run automatically, so he or she, I guess, wouldn't need to be there in order to, have the game running. So, yeah, Zero could totally be one of us. I guess we'll say that's possible. Well, that's possible. Huh? Like Clover said, Zero might be one of us. What are you saying, Jumpy? Didn't you hear what Ace said? Exactly. I said we shouldn't suspect one another for no reason. No reason? I've got a great reason. And what's that? The bracelets. He held out his left arm. Why are the bombs in our bodies connected to the bracelets? You're all thinking Zero's hiding somewhere, watching us, right? If he's doing that, then he could just detonate the bombs by remote control if someone did something they weren't supposed to. It'd be a lot more precise and a lot easier. But, if that's the case, then why is the bomb set off by a detonator in the bracelet? Huh, you got a point. I'm not done. Try applying the same ideas to the nonary game. All of the puzzles here are run all by themselves. In other words, Zero doesn't have to be controlling them for the game to move forward. Why is that? Why would Zero bother to do something like that? Junpei let the question hang in the air and looked at the others. It was Santa who answered him. So let's say you and Clover are right, and Zero's one of us. If that's the case, then it'd be really hard for him to keep track of us all, or control anything remotely. That's why all the puzzles are run by themselves. That's what you're getting at, right? Yeah. Junpei nodded. 7, when you were talking earlier, you said any one of us could be Snake's killer, right? Yeah, something like that. Alright then, I've got a question for you, Ace. You said something like Zero must be the one who killed Snake, right? Yeah, something like that. I can't think of any other explanation. So what do we get if we combine those? They fit together pretty well, I think. Something like this. Whoever killed Snake equals Zero equals one of us. 7 and Ace's theories aren't mutually exclusive. They actually complement each other pretty well. At least they do if Zero is one of us. No one spoke. Their faces were grim, but Junpei wasn't sure if they believed him or not. Finally, it was Lotus who spoke up. What were his motives? His motives? Yes. Isn't that pretty important? Why would Zero want to hide as one of us? Oh. That's because, Junpei choked. He hadn't thought of that, and had to be honest with himself. He had no idea. I don't know. Lotus sighed. Well, so much for making a persuasive argument, Junpei. In other words, you only had circumstantial evidence. I don't really think that's enough to go on, you know? Junpei was painfully aware of their eyes on him, and their disapproval. He tried to find something else, anything else to look at. Just when he felt he could bear it no longer. They heard a bell begin to ring. It was the clock at the central staircase. 3 a.m. That means we have 3 hours left. Then we need to move, now. 7, Clover, Junpei, I know how you feel, but you do understand that right now, it's important we trust one another, don't you? Junpei couldn't bring himself to respond. He swallowed the words he wanted to say and sighed. 7 and Clover remained similarly silent. Their eyes were looking at something else, very far away. We must go. We have very little time left. Ace's words put their feet to moving. They all knew where they were going. Their next destination was Mercury. It sat, bolted to the wall near the stairs that led to the casino and the kitchen between the 2 elevators. The Mercury card reader. Junpei stood in front of it with the Mercury keycard. 7 had given him the card. I found it when we were checking out the shower room. At least that's what he'd said. Junpei slid the card through the reader. The light on the reader turned green and made a tiny electronic noise. Now they were ready. Junpei and June had been chosen as the investigators. The reasoning being that they had been to E-Deck before, and no one else had. As before, Junpei set the elevator ahead to make sure the floor they were heading to wasn't flooded. And as before, the elevator returned as dry as when it had left. Once it had been checked for water, Junpei and June stepped into the elevator. There were only 2 floor buttons they could push, the C and the bottom buttons. The rest were destroyed or did nothing when pushed. Junpei hit the bottom button. The door closed. Slowly, they began to move downwards. Sometime later, Junpei and June stepped off the elevator and onto the bottom deck. They stepped off and saw that the hallway to their right ended somewhere between 20 and 25 feet from them. The hallway in front of them was a dead end, but not a regular dead end. This is a numbered door. It's the 8th one they'd found. There were 2 numbered doors on B deck near the central staircase. They were doors 4 and 5. There were 3 more numbered doors in the large hospital room. Doors 3, 7, and 8. Junpei and June had found another door on E deck, and Lotus and Santa had found a 7th on A deck. There was a 6 on the one on E deck, and a 1 on the door for A deck. 4, 5, 3, 7, 8, 6, and 1. And now, door 2 stood in front of Junpei. There was only one thing it meant. Do you think the next door we find? Yeah, I think so. Next one we find is going to be door 9. Despite himself, Junpei felt excited. There was something about that excitement that frightened him as well. He did his best to put it from his mind and headed back to C deck with June. All right, let's open these up. The piece of paper they'd folded up lay on the ground next to Junpei's legs. There were 7 of them, all told. They were written on paper pulled from Junpei's notebook, and each one bore a code name and a door. Why had they decided to vote that way? They decided it wasn't fair to simply ask everyone at once. That would allow people to force others to go through certain doors. Well, that also wasn't the only reason. Junpei had proposed the voting system, and he had a plan. It wasn't a plan he wanted anyone catching wind of, however, so he did his best to act calm as he began to open and read the pieces of paper. The first one read, Ace requests door 1. Yes, I do. Would you like me to explain why? No, we don't have time for that. Sorry. Let's keep going. Shutting down Ace. Boom. He opened the second one. Next is Santa. He wants door 6. Yeah, that's what I wrote. Junpei continued with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pieces of paper. Clover wants door 1, Lotus wants door 2, and 7 wants door 2. Eh? Wait a minute. There's no way I'm going anywhere with the Elephant Man. No, there'd be no point into you voting if we let people change their choices because of stuff like that. But, oh, just give it up, Lotus. It's not like I want to hang out with some exhibitionist grandma. I am not an exhibitionist. I'm wearing clothes. Barely. So? Last I checked, that's not a crime. Maybe, but what about common decency? Nobody wants to have to look at a chick who looks like a half-naked raisin. I'm going to kill you! Lotus's hair flared out like the mane of an angry lion, and she roared with a voice that shook the walls. With some difficulty, Ace eventually managed to restrain her. Junpei, read the rest! Oh, right. Junpei tore his eyes away and looked down at the 6th piece of paper. He opened it. June wants door 6. Yes. I don't really have a reason. I just felt like it. All the papers, save for Junpei's, had been read. He did some quick calculations in his head. People who requested door 1 were Ace and Clover. This was the door on A deck, near the central staircase. People who requested door 2 were 7 and Lotus. This was the door on the bottom deck, and could be reached by taking the elevator to the bottom of the ship. People who requested door 6, then, were Santa and June. This was the door on E deck, that could be reached by taking the elevator near the central staircase down. It took him less than a second to run the numbers. He opened the 7th piece of paper and spoke. Okay, last one is mine. I want to go through... Ooh, and now we get to pick. However, I think we shall pick next time. Well, thank you for hanging out with me today, guys. We had one heck of an adventure. Finding out these other doors, seeing how the paths kind of connect, and unfortunately, finding Snake. Well, hopefully next episode's a little cheerier, right? I guess it can't get too much worse than that, right? Anyway. Alright, so I think with that, we should call it a day. I'll see y'all next time, guys. Bye-bye!